Alright, what's going on, guys? Sal here. I'm back today. I'm going to be doing something a little bit different today. I don't usually post videos on Wednesdays. Happy Halloween. Don't usually post videos on Halloween either. This is the first time doing this. So happy Halloween, everybody. I probably should... Hold on, let me get a costume, actually. I just realized I almost broke my laptop. Hold up. Alright, we got my roommate's helmet. This is his Halloween outfit. I'll put that on, and yeah, I don't really want to get the whole other thing on, but here we go. A little Halloween spirit in it. Basically, what I wanted to talk about today is I wanted to talk about the NFL trade deadline, just show you how that's going to affect the teams that were active in the trade deadline, right? And we're going to be focused on the offensive players since defense is all conglomerated as one, doesn't really have much of an effect on fantasy really that much, unless it's like a star cornerback like Jalen Ramsey, something like that, or maybe somebody like a Khalil Mack moving positions. Obviously, that's affected the Bears defense for the better this year. Jalen Ramsey continues to produce out in Jacksonville. But that's a totally separate thing. We're going to focus on these offenses. So overall trade deadline, just my opinions, I thought that it was pretty slow, but it ended up picking up towards the end with Dante Fowler moving. We saw obviously Golden Tate, Demaryius Thomas. Demaryius Thomas was probably the one that a lot of people thought were going to move. Deshaun Jackson, we thought a lot of people, or at least I and a lot of other people thought he would move. Saw maybe Green Bay would get a pass rusher. They tried to get Fowler. They didn't. Green Bay shipping off Ty Montgomery for a 7th round pick, which is basically like cutting the man after what he did, and reports saying that he kind of took it upon himself, didn't listen to the coaches. You can't have that in the locker room if people aren't trusting a player. You're going to have to get him out of there before things just get hectic and chaotic. Clinton Dix, that's a big move. As a Packers fan, I'm kind of happy they got rid of him. A lot of people think he's great. Me, not so much. But getting to the offensive players, I mean, we had Golden Tate, we saw move. We saw Demaryius Thomas move. Those really are the big ones, though. Demaryius Thomas, Golden Tate moving positions. We saw the wide receivers moving. Let's see how it's going to kind of affect these teams. Ty Montgomery moving on the offense position to the Ravens. But let's really see how that's going to affect these teams. So we could start in Cleveland. Since the last time I've been here, I think they fired both Todd Haley and Hugh Jackson. We'll see how that affects that team. Let's look at Cleveland quick. This doesn't have to do anything with trade deadline. I think basically what this is going to happen is we don't know what's going to happen, right? It's a guess and tell, but it seems like Chubb is athletic. He's the man out there. Duke Johnson might get involved in the passing game more, as he should. So that's something to monitor, just to touch on this Cleveland situation. But I think it's going to be better for Baker Mayfield, right? Whole new fresh start. They know that they have these young guys out there with the rookies, Chubb, Baker Mayfield. They have guys like Landry and Njoku. They just got a lot of young talent out there. So it's good. It's easy to build an offense around that when you have talented players in positions and they're versatile. You have David Njoku, who's versatile. Landry can stretch the field. He can run in the slot. And you have guys like Baker Mayfield, who's clearly a versatile quarterback. That's why he was drafted #1 overall. So I think this is kind of a wait-and-see fantasy-wise. What they're going to be doing in the next few weeks. I don't know if Duke Johnson's going to be very active. It seems like Nick Chubb's going to remain the guy who's getting most of the work back there, but in the passing game, that limits him in DraftKings if Duke Johnson will be getting work. It's just something to touch on. But let's go to Baltimore. Ty Montgomery, he's not going to be on this slate. So basically, the reason is, or he will be on this slate, I think. Maybe not, actually. Yeah, no, so Ty Montgomery, I wonder if they actually updated any of that stuff. They had to have, I would imagine, but... See, this is like first look at this stuff. I haven't looked at this. Yeah, so they have Demaryius Thomas on Houston, all that stuff. The thing that they didn't update, though, since this stuff came out like Sunday night, Monday morning, whenever this one came out, this slate for next Sunday, or this upcoming Sunday, the thing that they don't update is the prices. So that's where you can kind of get an advantage in on some of these players, and that's where we're going to go. We're going to focus first. We're going to move away from Detroit. The Eagles getting Golden Tate, so that's another team to kind of throw into this mix. See how it affects them. And we're going to go over to Denver first. So let's just look at the wide receiver position in Denver now that Demaryius Thomas is out of there. So Demaryius Thomas, clearly a talented receiver in his prime. Probably coming down out of his prime right now. I just don't think he can get open. I don't think Case Keenum is very helpful for that. He thrived when he had Peyton Manning. Did decent with Brock Osweiler. But I think that this is a position that's going to help a lot of people on Denver. And it's going to be, first and foremost, the chalk of the week, Courtland Sutton, right? $3,900. I didn't even see his salary really when I was doing my first look. I didn't look at him too much because, yeah, he's a talented guy and they want to get him the ball more. But when you have Demaryius Thomas out there, you can't just sit Demaryius Thomas. Thomas was averaging 7 targets a game. That's going to go right to Sutton. Sutton's going to be the starting receiver. He's the only other big-bodied wide receiver out there who has any type of potential. They do have Deshaun Hamilton, who I will believe will see a good amount of the slot out here in Penn State. He's sure-handed. He had one good game, and he's been a little bit injured, nicked up since. I don't think he was even dressed for this past game. But I think Courtland Sutton's the play here, right? Courtland Sutton's the play this week at 3,900. You're always looking for that one or maybe even two value plays under 4K aside from a defense and tight end, or even a tight end. If you get two guys under the 4K range, you're going to open up a lot of things to get that higher priced quarterback, who this week we have a few good ones in Cam Newton, Jared Goff, Drew Brees, matchup-wise, and just point total-wise. You're going to be able to get up to Todd Gurley, Kareem Hunt, Christian McCaffrey, whoever you actually want to get up to in those positions. I think in cash, you can't not play him, right? I don't want to give away picks, and I don't give away picks. The first look lineups aren't me giving you away a lineup. That's not something that I ever want to do. I think it's just a little bit cheesy and tacky. I don't want to be coming on here and saying, here's my lineup, take it. I want to identify value for you guys. I think this, in a cash game situation, Courtland Sutton is the value, right? I'm going to take this off now, only because it's getting itchy and hot up in there, right? I got these lights on me. I think, no, I didn't just throw it on his laptop, good. But, yeah, so I think that Sutton, obvious value play at $3,900, starting in that offense, and he was already getting a lot of work. He was already getting looks. This man has had like two touchdowns called off the board for penalty. One time he was like, his foot was on the out of bounds line barely. It would have been like one of the catches of the year. So he's had a pretty bad touchdown regression or luck. I think that's going to come back up towards him. And I think that he's going to be the man out there now. Like I said, he was averaging like 3 to 4 targets a game already. 4 to 5 maybe actually closer to there when you look at his log here. And if Demaryius Thomas' 7 targets are going away, obviously Emmanuel Sanders is going to get some, but I think Sutton's a prime candidate to see 3 of those targets a game, which bumps his share back up to like the 7, 8, 9 range. Emmanuel Sanders, obviously this is going to help him as well. It just kind of solidifies that he's the #1 out there. Maybe that's something Sutton will become, but we can't just jump to a conclusion right now. I think the kid's talented, but Sanders has been the guy getting all the work from Case Keenum, whose job seems to be safe now since they released Chad Kelly for his incident. I thought at some point this year, Chad Kelly and Sutton were going to win like a Millie Maker or something. They're just both, I believe, talented, undervalued guys. This week, it's going to be Sutton. He's going to be the chalk in tournaments. I think he's an interesting play in tournaments. I don't know what the projections look like yet for ownership. Kind of too early in the week from the sites that I use, which is Fantasy Labs, Roto Grinders. I feel like he's going to be in the 20% owned at $3,900 for a starter. For a starter who's going to see 8 to 9 targets, who has touchdown upside, and an offense that can get the ball moving a little bit, in a matchup that definitely isn't the greatest matchup against Houston, but it's not the worst matchup in the world against Houston as well in the secondary, especially if you're a wide receiver too, and Sanders might see some of that main cornerback 1 coverage. So I think this is definitely a place to look at. Deshaun Hamilton becomes sneaky in the slot. I think he's a guy who catches everything that's thrown his way. He definitely does get separation. It's just a matter of if they're going to put him on the field if he stays healthy. We can look at some of these other guys, but I really don't think anything's going to come of these other guys. They were really just working with 4 receivers there. Hamilton being the 4th guy, getting a little bit of work in the routes run. And now with Demaryius Thomas gone, playing on almost every single snap, getting 7 to 8 targets, Sutton's the obvious guy there. You can go to the other side of this, and this is actually very interesting because I didn't even think about this. Houston and Denver are playing each other this week. Demaryius Thomas shipped from Denver to Houston, so he basically got traded. He had a home game, and he didn't have to travel with his team, so he's basically getting an extra home game this year, I guess. I don't know how the Texans' schedule wraps up towards the end of the year. He technically gets an extra home game, so he doesn't have to travel even though it's an away game. So that's interesting. So let's see how this affects it. So I just don't think Demaryius Thomas can get open, right? He gets an upgrade at quarterback. We're going to see if there's any chemistry brewing there, but just the chemistry that Deshaun Watson has with DeAndre Hopkins, it's not like Thomas is going to be a #1 receiver, maybe not even a #2 receiver, because we've seen him and Kiki have chemistry, and in albeit a limited sample size of about 2.5 games, but we've seen the connection, or 3.5 games, we've seen the connection be there. The only upside that you could say is that Will Fuller is out. That's why they made the move for Demaryius Thomas. So you could say that he had great connection with Will Fuller as well, but Fuller's a totally different wide receiver. He's a smaller body wide receiver in terms of like muscle on his body. This pretty tall wide receiver actually, but he just gets down the field, right? Fuller gets down the field and he makes the deep catches. Thomas is a guy who can't get open that much anymore. He has drop problems, so there's trust issues right there for a quarterback if he is a guy who's going to be dropping balls in crucial situations, and he just doesn't get open deep, right? He got open a couple of times this past year. There's been an overthrow, there's been some drops. Obviously, he's caught some passes that he's gotten open on, but just not as much as he would 3 to 4 or 5 years ago. Which just is still a younger guy, so it's kind of frustrating to see that. That's why Denver, 1, they released him because he couldn't get open, 2, because they had a guy like Courtland Sutton that they wanted to get on the field more. So as for Thomas, it's just kind of wait and see for me. I don't know if I like his upside in this situation because he's going to a place where there's more of a solidified #1, maybe the #1 in the entire league in DeAndre Hopkins, which is bold. I think he is the #1 in the entire league. He's just matchup proof. And he gets into the end zone, which Julio does not, so that bumps him away. Obviously, Antonio Brown's good as well, but I just personally think DeAndre Hopkins is #1. So he's going to a spot where Emmanuel Sanders sure was being regarded and targeted as a number 1, but he wasn't a surefire number 1. Now you have a surefire number 1 and a defined slot receiver in Kiki. I think it's going to be not difficult for Thomas to get the ball. This obviously elevates the whole Texans offense, helps Deshaun Watson if you ever want to play him. I just don't see the potential here since he can't get open. Hopkins, I don't think anything changes for him. Maybe now since Fuller's out, there'll be less coverage his way if Thompson can do a little bit better. So if anything, it's an upside for him. Kiki, I think this actually does help Kiki. Kiki's in the slot, so it's not really helping majority of the time in the slot, so it's not really hurting him that there's another outside weapon. Maybe target share will be thrown off a little bit, but I think from an ownership projection wise, when you're looking at even in cash games, but when you're mainly looking at tournaments, less people might be on Kiki now that you say, okay, now they have these 3 heads out there with DeMaryius Thomas coming out there. Kind of like when you were choosing between Fuller, Kiki, and Hopkins. I think now this might take some ownership off of him in a sneaky spot here against Denver in the slot. He's going to get Chris Harris Jr., so I don't love that position. I'm not totally on Kiki this week, but I think he's going to have low ownership because of where he's at, just his matchup wise, and now DeMaryius Thomas being over there, and kind of his price is up a little bit at 5,300. We're used to him being in the 4Ks, the high 4Ks. So that takes care of that, right? That takes care of a couple of things that happened right there. We saw some wide receivers moving around, and he's going to be playing his team this year, his former team of like 1 day ago. So that's interesting to look at. This just pointing out this New Orleans and Rams game is absolutely massive. Just a thing to hit on here. And I think it's a 59.5 point total in a lot of places. And basically the thing there is whenever you have a quarterback in those situations, 59.5 points to 60 points, anywhere in that range, really just 58 and above. But 59.5, 60, that's so rare in the NFL. Whenever you have a quarterback, they crush in that spot. Their projections or like their average points is like 30 on DraftKings, which if you play on DraftKings, you know that's ridiculous for a 4-point passing touchdown. And you got 2 of the best quarterbacks. The reason why that happens all the time is usually if there's high-scoring games at 60 points, 59.5 points, you have good quarterbacks or at least good offenses going at it. So most of the time it's going to end up in a shootout because of the point total indicating that. You have Jared Goff, you have Drew Brees. The Saints and the Rams are number 2 and 3 in offense behind the Chiefs this year. It's going to be a high-scoring game. Only like an injury would set that back, especially in New Orleans as well. So New Orleans is going to be Drew Brees probably more success there. And I think the Rams can play anywhere, and I think Goff, if there is high-scoring games, he's a great play this week. They're basically priced at the same thing. We can get into that on another video, but this game is something to target in cash. Even in tournaments, it's just so high-scoring at this point. It's like, how don't you play guys in those games? But let's now move over to where we got Detroit and Minnesota. Philadelphia, I don't believe is on this slate. I think they're on bye week this week. Yeah, so they coming from London, so they get the bye week. That wraps up nicely for them. I think the same is true for Jacksonville as well. They're also going to be on bye because of coming from London. I believe so. Let's just go to Detroit now, and the only thing to point out here is that Golden Tate is no longer here. You see, it says he's out here because he was shipped off to Philadelphia. So I think there's going to be obviously things going on in Philadelphia now that you have another wide receiver there bumping down people in that rotation. I think, though, that this helps a couple of people. Marvin Jones is going to be the guy a lot of people look towards. People that come here and look at just what's happened recently. Casual players, guys who aren't watching videos like you guys and girls. They're going to see 10 targets, 7 catches, 117 yards. They're going to see Golden Tate's not there anymore, and they're going to say, I'm plugging in Marvin Jones at 5,300. Minnesota actually does have a decent pass defense on the outside, obviously with Xavier Rhodes there. I think Marvin Jones, he's been getting treated like the #1 for most of the year. I think you see a lot of Rhodes there. I think that makes Kenny Golladay, at least this week, a good play, and for the remainder of the season. I think now he's the #1 out there. I know you have Marvin Jones. I don't think Marvin Jones is a #1. I think Golden Tate was the #1 in the slot just because Stafford had such a good connection with him, and he was a low ADAC guy who converted his targets. I think Kenny Golladay is now in line to be the #1. He's had a lot of bad luck this year. He's had not this past week, week 7 against Miami, he had a touchdown called back because of penalty. He was tackled at the 1-yard line against Green Bay, and he's had another touchdown. He's had 2 touchdowns called back because of penalty and tackled at the 1-yard line. So he has touchdown regression coming his way, even though he already has 3 on the year. But just having 3 bad breaks like that is probably going to lead to him getting in the end zone more. He's getting red zone targets. Seattle, they just played awful as a team overall, so I'm not worried about this. And we saw Carrion get a lot of targets that game. I'm not sure that's something that keeps up. But I think Kenny Golladay going forward is the best guy now out there in Detroit, and I think this week he's a sneaky play because he's priced a little bit above Marvin Jones. People are going to see what Marvin Jones did last week and want to go for Marvin Jones. This is the guy that's interesting to me. So you do have TJ Jones, and I know TJ Jones has been on the field a little bit this year, running some routes. But Brandon Powell, he's been a special teams player for them this year, here and there, returning some punts, some kickoffs. But they said that he's going to be a guy that takes over in the slot for Golden Tate. They're high on this kid. ESPN had an article in Detroit. The Detroit beat writer had an article about Powell. He's a guy to watch. If things come out later in the week that he's going to be the surefire starter, he's going to be seeing all the run in that Golden Tate role, Obviously, it's hard to compare him to Golden Tate. We haven't seen him been doing a lot on the field. But if he is going to be the starter in that role, we know Matthew Stafford likes to look to the slot. We know the Lions utilize the slot. And that's a spot that I like to target at this price of $3,000, right? So you're getting him for $3K. He's definitely worth him. You see here, there hasn't really been any updates. He just returned 2 punts. So he's a punt returner. He's a guy that they're going to put into the slot. And this is where it looks like the heir, if you will, of Golden Tate, the guy following him up, is going to be coming from. So Brandon Powell, somebody to keep an eye on later in the week. Maybe we get some more reports if he's going to be starting. If you want to take a flyer on him on tournaments at $3K, I kind of like it. If he is going to be taking up that Golden Tate role, there's upside there for sure. Cash is not something I'm touching unless I get more information at this point. But if you want to be early on him in tournaments, I like that a lot. I think some people he'll have some usage, some ownership, but not nearly as enough since there's a big question mark by what his role will be. Maybe he won't go out there at all. Maybe that's just the beat writer or the team not trusting him as much. Maybe they'll put TJ Jones, a guy who's had some more run. I don't know. This is where they said they're going to go, though. And then lastly, basically, we just talk about the Eagles who aren't on this slate. I'll quickly touch on them. I think Golden Tate's now probably the best wide receiver out there. I know we have Alshon Jeffrey and Nelson Aguilar. I know, obviously, Zach Ertz is probably the best offensive weapon that they have, but he's a tight end, listed as a tight end, probably more of a wide receiver based on the targets, receptions, yardage, everything that he's basically being played for so far this season. Jeffrey's a stud, obviously, out there. Maybe not a stud overall in terms of a top 10 wide receiver, but he's right around that mark. But I think Golden Tate's just a crafty receiver who can play on the inside. He can come into the slot. He can go into the backfield. He can go on the outside. He gets the job done. I think the Eagles' offense is out and actually dangerous because of that. Imagine if they would have got LaShawn McCoy back. It would have been nuts. I think that helps Carson Wentz's upside. I think it hurts Nelson Aguilar. It obviously hurts somebody like Jordan Matthews, who has been seeing some targets, some catches. They might even cut Jordan Matthews. I'm not sure what they're going to be doing about that. I think it helps maybe Jeffrey on the outside a little bit, but I don't think if he's going to be in the slot, that'll be much usage. I think, if anything, it might take targets away from Jeffrey. Aguilar is going to be forced to go to the outside more unless they run 4 wide receivers. I think basically what it does is, in this situation, Golden Tate's role is probably going to stay the same, but he has a new quarterback, so there might be some just lag between the connection there. But I think overall, he still has these 2 wide receivers in Aguilar and Jeffrey, who are somewhat similar to like the Kenny Golladay and Marvin Jones. Not exactly. I know Aguilar sometimes goes into the slot more often than not when Jones and Kenny Golladay are staying on the outside, is most of the time. But I think his role for the most part is going to stay the same, if not take a little bit of a hit just because of that connection not being there just yet. But maybe they'll get into a quick connection coming on the bye week. I think the Eagles aren't on a bye week this week unless they're on Monday Night Football. No, that's the Giants and Titans, or the Cowboys and Titans, Packers and Patriots Sunday night, which is going to be a great game. 2 of the best quarterbacks of all time going at it. And basically, that's where we're at with these trade deadlines. The things on defense, I don't really matter too much. Dante Fowler, 3rd and a 5th round pick. I think the Rams got him for. Good for the Rams. They're going for it all this year, right? They're undefeated. They have the offense to do it. They have the defense built to do it for this 1 year. Maybe towards the future, too. It'd be interesting to see what McVay does, if he actually does get a chip, if he goes somewhere else and tries to rebuild the Browns or something crazy, like people are saying. But I think this is just a rundown. I wanted to talk about these new guys, how they're going to impact fantasy, how not just themselves are going to be impacted production-wise, but how the new teams that they're going at are going to thrive from it. I think Deshaun Watson gets a bump. Obviously, all these guys who are getting the new weapons are going to get bumps. Carson Wentz, Deshaun Watson get a little bit of a bump. Courtland Sutton, I think, gets the biggest bump out of anybody. I think Brandon Powell's a very sneaky guy who's going to go into that starting offense as it seems right now. I think Demarius Thomas is a wait-and-see guy. He couldn't get open in Denver. Yeah, he has a better quarterback now, but he still has 2 other wide receivers who are capable out there. So we'll see how that goes. But that's it for right now. I'm going to come back probably tomorrow with some value plays, try and get another Sunday night showdown slate, especially since this is a fun game out there to you guys. Just a quick video to talk about the trade deadline and how it's going to affect fantasy football, specifically DraftKings PPR style. Appreciate you guys. Be good, be safe. Happy Halloween. Go get some candy. Eat a pumpkin or something, or seeds. I don't know what you guys do these days. Peace.